Hello, everybody, and welcome back inside the State Champ studio on the campus of Lawrence Technological University. As always, alongside former Michigan State Spartan and head coach at Turn 2, Mackenzie Long. My name is Kara Lyles. Kenzie, I know we talk high school softball, but just real quick, I want to talk a little bit about that Florida OU game yesterday. What really stood out to me was the emotions that these girls were containing in such a big moment, right?
Yeah, like you were saying, emotion is huge, but they were at such a quietness and a stillness. And there was a lot of freshmen that showed out, right? The pitcher for Florida was a freshman. The main hitter for OU was a freshman. But like you're saying, that those emotions are high, but yet they're so quiet and they're so calm. When they get in the box, there's one focus. And it's really cool to see OU in a position where it's kind of a must-win game because they haven't played in that situation. And you're starting to see those senior leaders help those freshmen. But man, what a game for the game of softball, and what a growth for the game of softball.
And you know, we talk week in and week out about how our players on the top 10 list and just players that we talk about in general are ready to go to that next level because of situations like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have two players on our top 10 list that their teams were playing in the College World Series this past week. And so it's really cool to see that they have a chance to go on and play on that stage. But what you really see is the maturity in the at-bats and in coming back and bouncing back, right? You had players that were struggling, right? Jada Coleman was struggling in that game, and yet she comes up and she hits a clutch walk-off home run. But you don't see the struggle, right? You just see her steadfast and doing what she can to impact the game. And so our players, as they continue to grow, that's what I want to see this high school playoffs is be steadfast in the moment, be quiet in the moment, and then let the game just come to you.
Such a great learning experience for all of our high school players and even the young college players too, just kind of going out there and learning from people older than you.
No doubt. I mean, you're going to see Florida's going to come back because they have so many freshmen in their lineup. And when you can perform at that level as a freshman, you're going to be really good for years to come.
Well, let's talk a little Michigan high school softball, shall we? Lansing Waverly beating Grand Ledge 17-8.
You know, Waverly had 20 hits in that game. They had 6 doubles, and they stole a lot of bases, right? But they just put offense after offense after offense. The Sutton sisters are their biggest offensive threats, right? They have combined 26 home runs and 25 doubles. Between the two of them, they score a ton of runs, and they did that in that game against Grand Ledge.
Imagine mom and dad sitting out there just home run after home run. What do you do?
It's
you know?
So cool. And it's so cool because they're back-to-back in the lineup.
Oh, my gosh.
And they just feed off of each other. In that game, they were 5 for 8 with 6 RBIs and 6 runs scored. So if you're looking at how to defeat Waverly, you got to keep the Sutton sisters down because they're the catalyst for their offense.
I wonder if there's a little friendly competition there, sister and
I
sister.
I know. I wonder if they feed off of each other or if they're competing internally. It's kind of fun to watch.
I was going to say that's kind of a good tactic, you know? I can hit more than you.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was a great game. Another great game we had was Leslie beating Grass Lake 4-3, walk-off fashion. How fun.
Yes, and that was the game that we kind of highlighted last week of the potential for an upset, right? And I wouldn't necessarily call it an upset because Leslie's been great all year as well. But in that game, Ada Bradford is a senior, and she was able to have a high-powered offense, just the 3 runs, right? But in that game, in the bottom of the 7th, they had 2 outs, and then all of a sudden you see a senior in Maya Fletcher get a single, and that's all it takes to kind of get the game rolling.
Which, at this point in the year, that's really all you need is one pitch, one person up there at the right time, right?
Yes, and you need somebody that believes in themselves, and Maya has grown a ton, and yet, so she's super steadfast in the box as well, quiet, confident, and she didn't make the game too much, right? Just a little base hit, and then let the game come.
Little base hit goes a long way.
Yes,
right? Especially at this point in the year, you've got to hustle everything out, because you never know.
Correct. I mean, she scored from first, right? And on that double, right, that's a situation you should be playing. Defenses should be playing no doubles, and they were up, like they were kind of close, right? And so a little base knock, a little double now scores a runner from first base.
That in itself is a huge learning opportunity. They're probably never going to forget that. They should maybe.
Yeah, you know, if you're in a situation where there's a walk-off situation, your outfielder should always play at a depth that if the ball gets hit over their head, then they have to earn the run. If a ball gets hit in front of them, then, you know, they get to third base, worst case scenario, right? So that's a situation that I think Grass Lake will learn from is, you know, we will probably want to play a little bit deeper so then that way, you know, that double doesn't turn into the scoring run.
Right. Well, another great game that we had this week, so many great softball games this week, was Dakota beating Utica in that D1 matchup. What'd you see from it?
Yeah, Maloney had a combined 42 strikeouts in the last 3 games. But what I loved about that game for them is they scored 15 runs in the 3 district games that they had, but they only let up 1. And all year we've been talking about that Dakota has to score runs, and they're starting to do that. But in that game specifically, you saw it at the bottom of the lineup, right? At the bottom of the lineup was kind of the ones that produced the runs, right? Annika Sliver had a 3-run bomb in that game, and she's down in the lineup. And so when you are trying to score runs and go far, you need 1 through 9. And in that game, the bottom was the one that kind of came through for Dakota, which is a great sign as they look to move forward.
Yeah, I feel like we've had this conversation before that it's so important to be able to count on maybe the bottom of your order just in case the top isn't maybe producing as well as they normally do.
Correct. When you are in a pressured situation, your top hitters, they might not get pitched to all the time, right? They might be worked around. So it's this time of the year that you need the other part of the lineup to kind of produce runs, and we saw that. And they're starting to get a little bit older, right, as well. Dakota's a little bit older on the bottom half of the lineup. So you see that they're starting to produce, which is really important to them because we know Maloney's going to be Maloney.
Right.
She had 42 strikeouts.
Yep.
She averages about 15 strikeouts a game. So she's going to keep the offense off balance. But is Dakota going to be able to score runs? And we're starting to see that for them.
Which is super exciting. Perfect timing in the year, right, to start finding that offense. Another great game we had was Franklin beating Garden City. What'd you see from that one?
Yeah, Franklin scored 3 runs in the bottom of the 6th inning. And I can't, as a coach, I can't tell you how much of a gut punch that is when you're winning and all of a sudden the bottom of the 6th, now you're down, right? But Savannah Mullen, a freshman, came through with a 2 RBI double in the bottom of the 6th, and then she ended up going on and scoring herself. And so when you're having a freshman do that at the top of the lineup, like, again, Franklin's in it for the long haul. That's awesome.
That's a huge confidence booster for not only her, but the entire team. Hey, our freshman can go out there and do that, right?
Yeah, and a big game, right? So McKenna Moore, their pitcher, did a really, really good job of keeping her team in the game. And all it took was one big hit, right? We've been talking about extra base hits all year, right? The importance of extra base hits. And all of a sudden in the bottom of the 6th, now you get that extra base hit from Savannah, and now 2-run score, and just like that, they're leading.
It's it can literally change in the blink of an eye. One pitch can change a whole game.
Yes, and when it happens in the bottom of the 6th, it's probably the worst feeling in the world because you're like, oh shoot, now I have to score. And so you put a lot of pressure on the offense going into the top of the 7th. So it was a really good game by Franklin.
Let's talk about the Northville versus Canton game. Northville coming out on top. What did you see from that game?
Gosh, Northville came out on top 1-0, but that game went 13 innings and 21 strikeouts by Emma Grau for Canton, yet Northville kind of came through. You know, they got into international tiebreaker, and they did the little thing. They got the bunt down, and then they scored a base hit, and that's all it takes. We as hitters, we tend to put so much pressure on ourselves, especially as we get later, and especially when you're facing a pitcher like Emma Grau, who has 21 strikeouts, but all it took was a bunt and then a little base hit. Now you scored a run. And so as we continue and as Northville continues, the key is using that success and catapulting into it of just do the little things right.
Yep, it shows how important it is to succeed and do those little things right to be able to advance in games that are getting incredibly competitive, right?
Yeah, and Mary Gugala, the pitcher for Northville, she went hand in hand with Emma. I mean, but a combined of only 7 hits in that game. It was just a great game, great pitchers duel. You know, it's one of those games that it's a bummer that somebody has to win, but kudos to Northville for outlasting Emma Grau and Canton.
Yeah, another super good game that we had last week was Linden versus Goodrich.
Yeah, another one of those games where the team that actually out-hit Goodrich ended up losing. Linden out-hit Goodrich 7-1 in that game, and yet they lost 2-1. It's all those little details: hit by pitches, walks, being in the right spot at the right time. Right, Jaden Ghost for Goodrich. We know who she's going to throw strikes to. She's going to strike a lot of people out. And Linden had a lot of great hits, but they couldn't capitalize and string hits together. And Goodrich just did a really good job of being in the right spot at the right time and scoring the runs when it was needed.
We had another very low-scoring game. South Lyon beat South Lyon East 1-0. How bad does that sting? Losing 1-0.
Yes, and you know that's a rivalry, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know that rivalry is important for a lot of those kids. And again, when you're facing somebody like Ava Bradshaw on the mound, you're all it takes is one run, and it went into extra innings as well, and it was a walk-off hit in the 8th that just happened to seal the victory for South Lyon. But it was a great game for South Lyon East, and Caitlin Solberg, went hand in hand with Ava, so I got to give her kudos as well, because she threw, knowing she was going to face a quality opponent on the other side, she went pitch by pitch with her and kept South Lyon East in the game.
And we do have to mention, how many pitches is normal for 2 softball games ish? How many?
Probably around 75 to 100 per game.
Okay, so we had somebody throw 302?
Yes. The airport pitcher threw 302 pitches to go on and win their district. And it was just a great game. What was crazy about that game is they ended up going and playing Huron and went into extra innings. I think they went into 13 innings, and they ended up coming out on top. But what's really cool is when you have a pitcher that's throwing that much like she is, then when you get into the next game, they scored 7 runs right away against Trenton. That's huge for the load of a pitcher, right? Because she just threw a ton of pitches. And to be able to go back and score early takes the pressure off of her, right? She had to be perfect in the game against Huron, but she didn't have to be perfect in the game against Trenton, which is huge when you have a pitcher that is throwing 302 pitches. Insane.
Well, we're getting down closer to finals, and these Player of the Year candidates, we are getting closer every day to finding out who wins our Player of the Year. But we do have a change this week. Carly Dorr is back on our top 10 list.
Yeah, Carly Dorr is such an important component for Saline. If they want to go far and they want to compete in this upcoming regional, they need a player like Carly Dorr. She does it offensively and she does it on the mound for them. She has 13 doubles and 6 bombs for them. But what I love is her stats tell a great story.
Yeah.
But her impact to her team is huge. Like, the team goes as Carly goes. And when you can impact your team that much, she makes everyone around her better. And so if Saline wants to have a chance, Carly has to be Carly and do her thing.
That's what we keep talking about, is one of the key factors of our Player of the Year, right? Is what can you do for your team to make sure your team is having success?
Correct. And when you are like somebody like Carly, when you can make everybody around you better and compete at a higher level, she brings out the best in the people around her. She really, really does. And so when you can do that game in, game out, whether you're successful as a individually successful or not, when you can bring the best out of the people around you and you can have that much an importance of your team, it deserves a spot at our top 10 list.
Our top 10 does freeze after the regional final, and voting will end on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Just a reminder, you can always vote at statechampsw.com. Well, we have a really exciting week coming up. So many good matchups happening this week, but we want to preview a couple. Let's start with South Lyon Saline in that regional semifinal.
That's the one I'm most looking forward to. I mean, you have 2 senior pitchers, 2 players that are on our top 10 list going at it on the mound together. And I'm really excited to see what Ava Bradshaw does in that game, because she has to be her best, because Saline has such a high-powered offense and a great pitcher, right? When you play teams that have great offenses but maybe an okay pitcher, that's great. But Saline kind of has a whole package. They're one of the most complete teams, and so South Lyon's Ava Bradshaw has to be legit on Saturday.
It's a kind of a game where you really can't take any pitch off,
no,
right? You always have to be on your game.
Yeah, and Ava Bradshaw can impact the game in the box too. And so again, you've got to be careful with Ava in the box, because if you put her in a situation to be clutch, she will be that way. But you have 2 seniors, and that's what I love, is it's seniors going after a senior, and so it's going to be the end for one of them, and you never want the end to happen.
Well, let's talk about the Lake Orion Regional, a very strong potential in that final, right?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the most complete game, because you have Gracie Maloney against a very, very scrappy offense in Lake Orion, but you have Riley Limburger on the mound for Lake Orion. The key to that game is how tired are the pitchers going to be, and are we going to limit the walks on both sides? Because the more bases that you give, the more runs are going to score. I think that's a game where runs are going to come at a premium, but I also think it's going to be kind of a high-scoring, like 5-6 game. So I think that game is going to be a really good game.
Definitely excited to see that one. Also excited to take a look at Allen Park and Woodhaven.
Yeah, good luck to those teams because I just already know like the vibes of that game, the excitement of that game, especially after Woodhaven beating Allen Park 10-9 and the comeback of Allen Park, right? And that we talked about confidence. I think that's going to be a really big, high-scoring game. You have a lot of firepower in the box. You have a lot of big-time names in the box. I'm excited to see what happens in that game. I think it's going to be a game of grit and competitive nature. I think there's going to be a lot of competing going on in that game. I think that's going to be the most exciting regional just because of the vibes around that game.
I was going to say, coming into a game like that where you know it's going to get good, those are the best ones to take a look at. Even like as a player, you're like, you know what? This is going to be a fun one.
Well, and what's fun about that game is it's going to be an all 7-inning game because like we saw, you know, Woodhaven was winning 10-0 and then all of a sudden they barely won 10-9.
Right.
So you know it's going to be a 7-inning affair. You can't take a single inning off. And both of those teams score in bunches, you know, 5-6 runs at a time. Both have home run power. And that's definitely a game that the bats are going to be hot.
And I know for a fact that those middle infielders are going to continue to turn 2. Swing Away is presented by Lawrence Technological University. Be curious, make magic. Swing Away is also presented to you by Turn 2 Softball. Continue to dream big and invest in development. Visit our website at turn2mi.com. The Michigan High School Athletic Association, promoting the value and values of educational athletics. The Michigan Army National Guard, a proud sponsor of the MHSAA. And the Detroit Athletic Club Foundation's Michigan High School Male and Female Athlete of the Year Award.